Welcome to Love Ignites Peace Bathtub Chats Out of the Bath Book Club edition for the month of February.
Yay.
Yay.
This month we are discussing the book Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss.
So I thought it was a pretty interesting read. I'm anxious to hear what you guys all think about it here in a little bit. But we are one book club member short tonight. Annabeth is home. She is sick. She doesn't feel good, which is a big disappointment because I don't know about you guys, but I really did want to hear she bought that device to listen to plants. So we're going to have to follow up on that in March. How is everybody doing? You've been living the Celestine prophecy. Did you have any coincidences? Do you have anything interesting happen since last month?
I had an interesting one that I think everybody here knows about, but podcast listeners, it was a really interesting one. So after we read the Celestine prophecy, we were talking all about coincidences and how when you're open and receptive to them, they come into your life consistently. So originally we were supposed to read The Untethered Soul, which I was really excited about. We got off the podcast. Well, I hope we read that one later because I've heard good things. Regardless, my boyfriend had told me about this book. He had just been telling me about it. Said it was super interesting. We changed the book club book. Nobody knew about this. And of all the millions and billions of books in the world, it was this book that he had just been telling me about, which I don't know what that says, but it was a very timely coincidence. So it was cool.
I love that.
That's a good one.
That's like the cherry on top to our book club discussion last week.
Yeah, and I don't know if he did this on purpose, but his bookmark, so he let me borrow his copy, and his bookmark was a picture of us. And I was like, are you just being corny? Like, are you trying to get some bonus points, or was that actually your bookmark? But it was. So that was funny.
That's really sweet.
Well, what did he say about it? I mean, outside of it being interesting, I'd just be curious.
So he loved it and he was kind of telling me about it before I even read it on my behalf, because he was saying he thought I would be interested in it because I struggle with anxiety. And I don't necessarily have a lot of the same phobias, but I've been kind of, I don't want to say healed, but I've made a lot of progress with also having OCD. And so I think that's why he had even told me about it in the first place. I hate to say it, it wasn't my favorite book. We can get more into that later, but there definitely were some good takeaways. But I think that's why he thought it was super interesting. And he's super, super open-minded. So he was like, hey, maybe this is something you should try. So I think he was looking at it with the lens of it being helpful for me. So maybe that is why that I ended up reading it.
Well, anybody else have a check-in from last month?
Every day is a good day in the flow. I think the more we pay attention and have that exchange of energy, which can be sitting around and actually face-to-face talking, or an exchange of energy when we meditate, but just being mindful with the intent of staying in the flow. Every day is magic, honestly. It just makes it so much easier.
Okay, you just triggered something for me. I guess I do have it's kind of piggybacking off of Jenna, but also when you said energy, as we know that this is kind of a new world for me, and really me kind of jumping in and going, okay, let's do this. Last week, I met a gentleman who just out of absolutely nowhere, I was not even supposed to be in this place at this time, but I ended up meeting this gentleman who was very much into this lifestyle, I'll call it. And it was really interesting because he was telling me about like these books to read, and I was telling him about Love Ignites Peace and the book club. And what was really interesting about it, and I've never had anybody do this outside of obviously the coincidence being meeting him, but he, like, when he shook my hand, he was just like, you have really good energy. Thank you so much for having good energy. And it was just kind of like,
Aw.
I had willies going on. Like, even thinking about it, my hands are a little clammy right now. But I guess, I mean, that was really interesting, being open to it and seeing how many people are really kind of out there that are really participating in this life and at this level, and also wanting to give those energies and welcoming those energies. I don't know. There's so much behind it, and for me, and digesting it. And I think I need to spend more time digesting these things.
I'm actually going to piggyback off that because he gave her his favorite book reading list. And so I'd been contemplating what we were going to read after Many Lives, Many Masters. And I thought, well, there's this book called Journey of Souls by Michael Newton that would be a really good follow-up to this book. Mm-hmm. Guess what? One of his recommended books to Darian was
Journey of Souls.
Journey of Souls.
Yes. Yeah. Do I get the prize?
That book was kind of the book for him that just really took him down this path. So, yeah.
But we're not reading that next. But anyway, it was just a little coincidence.
So based off of what you were just saying, Darian, it's so funny, the little coincidences flowing from, Jenna, Teresa, Darian, and now to what I had to say, it all just perfectly links together. What I have noticed more is the insight where the collective shift in consciousness, right? We're not going through I don't know if they use the word revolution or evolution, technology as much now as we are in thought. And I'm not saying that we're not still evolving greatly in tech, but what I'm saying is it's been amazing the number of people that are evolving in thought. And the people coming out of the woodwork, messaging us on social media and wanting to engage with this different way of thinking. It's just really opened my heart and made me so grateful and excited where we're all headed and what we're all doing to truly get our freak on and raise our vibration.
It's exciting time.
So Ashley, we haven't heard from you. Do you have anything you want to share for the check-in?
I've been a lot more aware, I guess, of energy. For one, I've noticed, and this is something I'm trying to figure out, I have the hardest time getting out of bed in the mornings. It's like I have this magnetic pull to not get out of bed. Like, it's bad. Like, I slept until 1:30 p.m. today. Like, it's bad. I can't get out of bed. But once I get out of bed and I walk around for a second, do whatever, I'm fine. I feel this release of energy. So it's really interesting because it feels like this heavy magnet weighing me down when I'm in bed, and then I get out and poof, it's gone. So I don't know what it is, but trying to figure that out. But I definitely been very aware of the feeling of the shifts of feeling it versus not feeling it.
Has it been like that for you forever or just recently?
I've always struggled getting out of bed, but also the awareness, conscious level of things has definitely increased over the last couple of years. I had a little bit of it the last place I was at, and I worked with Tracy, and there were other energies because it was a bed that other people had slept in before me. So I'm wondering, same thing, different place here, but it's a lot more intense here, which is making me interested because I'm like, well, I need to figure this out because I'm going to be moving a lot. So, yeah.
That's interesting. Well, if you do end up checking in with Tracy before the next podcast, keep us posted on what was going on there.
Yeah, no, I will.
Spiritual energy work.
Right. Okay. So let's get to the book. Do you want to read the summary?
Sure thing.
Okay.
Dr. Brian Weiss, MD, a highly respected traditional psychotherapist and head of the psychiatry department at Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami Beach, was trained to look at the world through the lens of a physician. Little did he know his time with one of his most difficult yet groundbreaking patients, Catherine, would change both of their lives forever. For 18 months, he worked with the 27-year-old lab technician with no improvement. Her anxieties, phobias, and depression seemed to be getting worse. Eventually, he decided to try hypnotherapy, a method he had performed on patients many times before. While under hypnosis, Catherine began spontaneously visiting her past lives and receiving messages from divine masters. He was astonished. As a scientist and a physician, Dr. Weiss approached each of her sessions with skepticism, questioning that she was actually experiencing a past life and hearing this divine guidance. His disbelief was finally put to rest when, under hypnosis, Catherine shared remarkable revelations about his family and his dead son. With each regression, she became less anxious, and her recurring nightmares dissipated. Dr. Weiss listened to her revelations, researched further, and finally brought this information forward to share with the world.
So what do you guys think? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Jenna, you've already kind of weighed in. Tell us more.
So for me, I'm a little bit of a skeptic when it comes to past lives. So I had to try to look at this with a blank slate. But of course, your pre-existing notions about things are always going to impact your opinions of stuff. However, the part that I just didn't love the way it was written or the story that was told. And I think that's what I got hung up on. It's really interesting because what Ashley said about the previous book is kind of how I felt about this one, where there were some super profound things that were said in here, but for me the story was just slow, so I found that it was hard to get through because I didn't love that it focused so much. I felt like the bulk of it was on what her past lives were, which is important for the story, right? Because that's like her unraveling and getting over these phobias. But it was so much of it. I'm like, okay, get to the revelations, get to the learning, get to the takeaways. And so much of it was the stories, and they were a little slow for me. So that's kind of what I got hung up on. But having said that, I mean, I have some post-its in here of some great takeaways. So I think it's a good example of a book you can read, maybe not 100% resonate with, but still find some takeaways for me.
Great point.
You know, I would say I agree. I think where the revelations and like the end of each of the stories, like we'd get the story, but I'd never get the takeaway. And then it was kind of, I think it was chapter 11, 12, like that second half of the book. It was like 3 pages all about it. And I'm like, well, how does that even go back to the stories that we were hearing at the beginning? The stories were cool. And then it was just like so repetitious that I was kind of over it as well. Again, perspective, more education. Yes, I think there was too much too fast that you really didn't get the opportunity to go, huh, so this is how this happened and this is how she got here. Like the choking gaggy reflex. Like, what about that? Okay, so we kind of touched it was in this past life, but why is it affecting her now? You know, we didn't really get to make those connections.
Okay.
I really liked it at the very beginning, but I thought it was going to progress and it didn't the way that I kind of hoped.
That's how I felt about it. I loved it at the very beginning and the very end, but the in between, I was kind of finding myself flipping quickly. But I think Teresa made a good point on one of the initial podcasts, which, again, the whole process of this is being open-minded, right? And I remember Teresa said something like, things hit you at different times when you're ready for them. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I wasn't ready for this book. I thought this was going to be the best book I've ever read because of the coincidence that happened. So I'm like, maybe it's later down the line, I'm going to need to pick it back up again and it will hit me differently. I'm open to that.
And based on you saying that, there is actually kind of what I found to be the final line. And I don't know if you had this tagged, but I think this applies to what you just said, which was on page 133, basically in quotes, it says, patience and timing. Everything comes when it must come. Everything will be clear to you in time, but you must have a chance to digest the knowledge that we have given to you already. So I would wait. And so I feel like that right there applies to you. And definitely me on the digestion side of it. I don't think I spent enough time digesting everything I'm reading.
Different strokes for different folks, right? Like, I don't necessarily know that the takeaway is that everyone needs to go have a past life clearing. Like, for me, that's probably not going to be an avenue I necessarily go down. However, I think this is it's a good opening to maybe trying something that you haven't tried before when all of your other tools in your toolbox, I know you at Love Ignites Peace like to talk about that. Maybe after you've exhausted all of your tools, this is a good opening for trying something different, trying something that you've never tried before, and just being more open-minded to it, because it might not hurt to try. Probably doesn't.
So if it might not hurt to try, why do you think you might not try it?
Good question. This girl had some deep clouds hanging over her head, right? So I feel like she was at the end of her road, and other resources that she had tried were not working for her. And I feel like at the current place I'm in my life, I don't feel like I have a dark cloud over my head. So that could be part of it too. It's like, hey, maybe I gotta read this. Knock on wood. I don't want any dark clouds over my head, but maybe it really has to do with the time of your life that you're going through too. Like what energy you feel like you're most associating with it, like when you're going through a hard time.
Maybe a different way to look at it. The way he wrote it was a case subject. She had a lot of issues, let's say, right? For a lot of people like you don't have a lot of that kind of thing. I love, love, love hypnosis. I'm an excellent subject. I can go out in 10 seconds or less. Have some fun with it. And past lives, it's even fun to approach it. Why did I have a past life? Was my parents, my siblings in a past life, or a best friend? Or is my best friend someone, an aunt or an uncle in my life now? And that might be a different way for you guys to approach it in a, how am I connected to the people in my life? It's kind of fascinating and a really fun way to go into past lives that way before, oh my God, I have a trauma kind of thing, you know? I had a very good friend. We were in a spiritual book club and all this woo-woo stuff in San Diego. And this particular woman could not have children. And her husband wanted children desperately. She tried everything and went to a hypnotist and did some past life regression for quite a while. And in this past life, she was like a Nazi doctor and was doing experiments on women during that wartime. And in this life, that's why she can't have children. So sometimes there's things that you dig a little deeper and you find some answers, but I like just knowing how we're all connected in a past life. I love that kind of stuff. So have fun with it.
What did you think, Ashley?
So I did the audiobook version of this because I was a little crunched on time, but I would like to, I think, maybe actually read it at another point in time because I work better visually than auditory. So there's only so much I can retain from listening. I think maybe listening helped because it felt like a podcast almost, and I was just listening to somebody's experiences of their past lives. I don't know if there was too much of a learning takeaway from it, just because it just felt like a lot of experiences listening. But I mean, kind of what Teresa was saying, like I find it interesting to just talk and think about past lives and just hearing somebody's experience. So, I mean, I liked it. I wasn't in love with it, but I found it very interesting to hear somebody's experiences on their past lives. But I think reading, I might be able to get a little bit more out of it if I actually like read it and saw it. But I liked it. I found it very interesting.
You girls that are kind of new to this and reading, just for instance, this book, did you find yourself asking more internal questions like, well, wait, then how does that work? And well, wait a minute, if that's that, how did that go? Did it make you dig and want to know more about families and soul families and life and reincarnated? And or did you just read the book and, oh, reincarnation's cool. A past life is cool.
The one thing I definitely thought of at one point in time was like, okay, so here's someone experiencing and talking about their deaths and past lives, and in a sense, like what's beyond death and that in between even. And then I thought about the stories when it comes to more religious perspective and like kids who have been in the in-between and come back to life, and they talk about their experience and how it's similar but different. And it just made me wonder, is everybody's in between or that path, like the next step or whatever it is it catered to a specific
you, like as in religion, what makes sense to someone's not going to make sense for someone else. So like the after in between, I just was thinking, is this universal or is this in a sense tweaked for this specific person? Well, we're not going to read Journey of Souls as our next book, but reading Journey of Souls might answer that question for you.
I actually have a question for the group. So it sounds like some of us on the podcast have had experiences with past lives, hypnosis, that sort of realm. And I am interested to see if anyone wants to share that experience and what that's been like for you.
I mean, I have so much to say about your question and kind of tying into like or dislike of the book in general. So maybe I'll go that direction and answer your question within it. For me, I have been introduced to this for a while. When I was 16, I started doing hypnotherapy. I had a ton of fear. I was just so freaking afraid. I could not fully embrace and enjoy life. So New Year's Eve, I told my parents that I was ready and it was time for me to try something else. And so I started doing hypnotherapy. That is where I experienced my first experience of past life. So for me, it was super wild. And this is one of those things where I very much understand and respect that this concept of past lives can take a minute to warm up to, especially when you're raised in a certain traditional religious background. Now, I know later we're going to discuss our favorite passages, which actually ties into this. So maybe I read it now, maybe I read it later. But I firmly feel that because of my past life experiences, which I will share a few here in a moment, that is why I undoubtedly believe in past lives, because of my personal experience. So in this first past life experience that I had, I literally could see myself. I was under hypnosis and I could see myself like running through a field to this man that I like absolutely loved, and I got shot. This was like back in the olden days, and I died in his arms. That man was my brother in this life. It was so profound. Like even as I'm talking about it, it's like making my eyes well up a little bit because I could feel it. And there was nothing that I was guided to. Like once you've done hypnotherapy, you also understand this. As he talked about in the book, it's not something that he's saying, okay, now you're in 1870. He's asked, they're prompting you for the questions and you for what you can see. And at this time, I don't remember. That was 10 years ago. I don't remember what that healed, solved, overcame. But it was this unbelievable experience. I'm under hypnosis, and all of a sudden, I can see this whole thing play out in front of me, and I could feel it. So that was my first experience, which started me dipping my toe in. And what I found to read is, it's not exactly tied to what I'm saying, but he said, I knew that this information and these messages were true. I knew this not only for many years of careful study of people, their minds and brains and personalities, but I also knew this intuitively. Even before the visit from my father and my son, my brain with its years of careful scientific training knew this, and my bones also knew. And that's how I would explain my experiences with past lives, is I know it because I felt it in my bones. I felt it in my soul. I felt it in every part of me. And then on many other podcasts, I've kind of talked about this story, so I'm not going to go into the whole thing. But my most profound healing came from a past life clearing. And it's funny because I had this introduction to past lives, but you might have the introduction, but what do you do with that, right? like you said, you're like, I don't have a cloud that I'm necessarily trying to, shake away. I am not necessarily knowing exactly who to go to, although you now have the Loving Gates Peace resources. If there was someone that you wanted to go to, highly recommend working with Tracy for that spiritual energy work side of things. But for me, it was all of this fear that I had around men. Unbelievable, debilitating, make my legs shake, fight or flight, run for the hills. Fear around romantic relationships with men. Let me put that, not men, romantic relationships with men. And there was nothing that I could point to in this life that had caused that. I literally was gobsmacked, mind blown, frozen in place with no idea what to do. And I had tried kind of like we were talking about, a ton of other resources to try to work through this. And so it was when my mom said, okay, I have a lady that you can work with, and you might think it's crazy. So just, you got to lean into this thing. And I was so desperate. I was like, I will do anything. And the funny thing is, Jenna, you knew me at this time. This is when I was a sophomore in college. Like, this literally was my moment where I leaned into that maybe, and I literally walked out of that session. And I've told this story, but the funny thing is I sat down and I asked her, I was like, am I supposed to be a nun? Like, is there something I'm missing here? Like, am I not supposed to be a nun? Is there something I'm missing here? Like, I really don't want to not be women. I want to be women. I'm really attracted to you guys, but like, if there's something here, like, just tell me, because I cannot live this way anymore. And she laughed again. She's like, I'm really not getting that. I'm like, oh, thank goodness, because I don't really want to. And that's, if I did, that'd be great, but like, I don't. So,
Can you guys imagine Ashlyn as a nun?
It would be like the happiest nun in the whole world.
You like Sound of Music Part 4.
They would never wear a habit or a long thing because there is like no fashion in that.
He'd be wearing heels and pearl earrings and
little Sister Act vibe. No, so anyways, very long story short, I walked out of that a different person because what she came upon was a really traumatic past life. And I believe that was one of the primary things that I needed to clear and heal in this life, especially at the age I was at. And yeah, so I just spoke a lot. Now, if anybody else would like to go, those are kind of my 2 cents. Actually, also last quick thing on my thoughts around the book within this. I actually didn't love the book because for me, it was kind of, I don't want to call it juvenile because it wasn't juvenile, but a lot of the things I already knew, experienced, like, it didn't blow my mind anyway. It didn't enlighten anything new that I was surprised about. And I agree, after a while, like the first 25%, the first quarter of the book, I was like, oh yeah, I'm loving this. And then I was like, okay, this is a lot of the same. And then I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of a lot about him and not about his patient. Oh, okay. And so I kind of had that experience. I didn't hate it. I liked it, but I didn't have any big revelations.
That part did rub me the wrong way a little bit, that I think it is so true that we as humans can find immense learnings and healings and growth from other people's experiences, from helping them through those experiences, from being alongside them through those. But this woman, Catherine, went through some really traumatic events, and then he did flip it to talk about how much it impacted him, which it was his book, of course, but it just, that part rubbed me a little bit the wrong way, where I didn't necessarily feel resolved in her healing journey, because it really went from, this woman has intense phobias. She unlocks these past lives. We learn all about them. And then she's instantly better and she's glowing. And I wanted more of the why and the how. And like, I guess he couldn't write about that because he didn't quite understand. But I was like, is it because she's recognizing these past lives? Is it because she is talking about them and unloading that trauma? Is it because, like, what piece of it is, that's where the connection was a little bit lost for me. I wanted more details on that and kind of the inner workings of it. And maybe the reason that we didn't get to that is because it does seem like it's a little bit of a mystery, even for the, like, it's a mystery for everyone, even the people that have experienced this. It's kind of about intuition, but that's where I wanted the dots connected a little bit more from a story standpoint.
Teresa, do you want to attempt to answer Jenna's question in that?
I feel like there's several questions in that. I think probably Paige, I know this is the third time I read this book. I did a workshop on it. The first time I read it was, oh my gosh, when did it come out? When did it come out, you guys? When was it written?
I think.
When?
70s or 80s.
So the first time I mean, go back a long time. I was, wow. I thought it was so cool the first time I read it. It was so different, but go back 30 years, it was sort of new-ish in that time. Years ago, I did a little workshop, and now this time I read it again, and honestly, I feel it's old news. For me, that's where I'm at today reading it, because I feel there's so, oh my God, it's like having a antique typewriter and now we can, dictate into our phones. That's not answering your question, but in a way it is. Where you girls are now, there's so much more information. People talk about things more. There's the energy and this movement. There's so much information that maybe it feels old to you too, even though it might be the first time you're reading it. And you're wanting the finite, and we're not getting it from him in the book. That would be my best explanation.
I'd kind of like to tie this back to everything is energy.
Mm-hmm.
So, your soul is what's having this experience, and your soul is energy, just like your physical body is energy. So I believe that it works under hypnotherapy because and I have had a past life experience under hypnotherapy that got cleared as well. There is something about when you experience it under hypnosis, and then while you're under hypnosis, the hypnotherapist is literally walking you through the fact that you're safe. This is over. It's gone. You don't need to hang on to this, all of this. And so, you're under hypnosis. So they're talking to
energy of the time.
The energy of the time. And they're also talking to I don't know if they're talking to your subconscious mind, or your unconscious mind, but they're talking to a part of your mind that you're not conscious of. And so as a result, that energy then is just released. It no longer has this power over you that it once had. And I think working with Tracy, she does the same thing. She energetically clears the power that past life had on your soul.
Interesting thing about that, though, is you don't always have to see it and you don't have to know what it is. She can just clear the energy. And when we had her on our podcast, she made a really beautiful point around the idea with what you just said, with everything is energy. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. So if you believe that you have the soul, when you die, your soul is your energy. Your energy you don't just all of a sudden stop. We are energy. So that energy continues on. So that's how, A, the continuation of energy, but B, in this quantum universe, everything is happening at the same time. There is no time. There's no past. There's no present. There's no future. So that allows us to tap into the energies at any point along this timeline. I know that sounds like a lot, but from the quantum level, that's kind of a very, very, very baby explanation of how and why, A, you can access these past energies, and B, why the soul would continue to have the ability to reincarnate, etc. I also wanted to throw one more quick past life out there because I think it's interesting. Teresa, you had mentioned the fact that you really like to know how we're connected.
Uh-huh.
And this one was a little more recent. This was probably a couple years ago. I was really struggling with someone in my life that wanted to control me. Everything I did, they had an opinion about what I was doing. Then they were unhappy with me if I didn't do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, you're not my mom. Not that my mom
wasn't me.
And my mom doesn't. And my mom doesn't try to do that anyways. But I'm saying it was kind of like a motherly, I'm confused. And I was able to work with Tracy very easily and be like, hey, there's a lot of love here. I'm not really sure what's going on. And she happened to have been my older sister in a past life. And in this experience, there was some angst around me getting to do what I wanted and blah, blah, blah. Literally, we cleared that past life. And I am not exaggerating when I say we have never again had the same issue.
And the other person doesn't know.
Yeah, they have no idea I worked on this. There was no negativity. There was only light and blessings. It didn't implicate them in any way. It just was like, hey, we've got some weird energy happening here. Maybe there's something that could be deeper that we could work on to help us move forward. And as you said, Jenna, we have our tools in our toolkit. If that didn't work, on to something else. But it was a tool in my toolkit. I gave it a whirl, and it really profoundly helped. So,
Has anyone else had a past life experience they want to talk about?
I can kind of share, again, really new to it. And Paige knows a little bit. Like, I kind of get to these points where I'm like, okay, I have no other options. I am in meltdown city. I have got to figure out something. Long story short, I was having these trances. Basically, it's about the best way I know how to explain it. So I called Paige. I was like, I don't understand what's happening. I have no control of this. I need to talk to somebody. Paige is like my personal doctor most days. Like, I go to her and get referrals. So I go to Tracy. And during the session, we end up kind of going into a past life experience. And out of the absolute clear blue, Tracy asks me about, she's like, does your side hurt? And like, even thinking about it again, my hands kind of go clammy. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, okay, I was a frontier. I'm from this area. I died here. Now I'm going to kind of pause there and give you a little context of, I had spent probably 18 months going to various doctors, being poked and prodded to figure out what was wrong with my right side. I mean, anything and everything. It was insane. And nobody could tell me what was wrong. So I'm like, okay, this is just going to be a growing pain, we'll call it. Now back to Tracy. She says that and she's like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, super weirded out. And she goes through this whole love, light, and blessings and all of that. And to this day, I have never had that side pain again.
Yeah, and I remember you really struggled with that for a long time. Yeah, I'd forgotten, but thank you for reminding me of that.
It was the craziest thing. I mean, and obviously there were others, and I didn't even go to her for that, but that just happened to be something for me that I was like, what? But past life, and somehow it was related to something that I had been dealing with for months before, and yeah, there's the Willies.
you hadn't said a word about it. That's not why you were on the call.
Not at all.
I'm not going to share my past life experience because I think we need to move on. But what I will say is the very first time I did have a past life regression, it was not intentional. I was at the hypnotherapist working on something else, and all of a sudden, you don't even know that it's going to happen sometimes, whether it's Tracy or whether it's under hypnosis.
True.
I might have already said this, but I do just want to interject. Tracy is the woman who does spiritual energy work. We mentioned her several times in this, so I just want to throw that out there that she does beautiful spiritual energy work. She is just unbelievable human being in general. And you can book a session with her at lovingnamedspeace.com. And if you're interested and you're curious, or even read more about what she does on her spiritual energy work page.
Well, honestly, we just released a podcast a couple of Tuesdays ago.
Are you saying this is a coincidence?
Yeah, maybe. So if you really want to learn more about her, go listen to that podcast. It's really a very excellent, heartwarming, interesting podcast. So,
and it'll explain much more in depth.
I don't have a past life experience, but I do have something that's interesting to share that might sound supposed to be controversial, but it just opened up more conversation. So I feel like the reason I have a tough time with past lives is because I've had a handful of really, really close people in my life pass on, like grandparents, great grandma, who I was very close with. And I could not agree more that the energy is never destroyed. Like, I totally feel her presence all the time. She loved I'm talking great grandma in particular. She loved butterflies. I see butterflies fly me in the most opportune moments. And like, I get those signs and I know they're there and I know her spirit is with me. And I don't believe that she like reincarnated as a butterfly, but like, I think those are just signs. The thing that's hard for me is like, you have these people in your life that you like deeply, deeply love. And even though their shell of a human form is not the same as their soul, it feels really hard to ever think that that person that you know and love so deeply could ever like take on a different capacity, if that makes sense. I know her as my grandma who always had her, like, her hair dyed until she was 96 years old. She had her driver's license until the day she died. She had her nails done. She was fabulous. She kept in great shape. I know that those are personality traits and those are physical characteristics, and those aren't necessarily one and the same as a soul. But to me, it's like that's the part that I want to be everlasting, I guess. So to think of those people like coming back as someone different is an uncomfortable concept to me. So it's not so much, oh, I don't have any past life there. That doesn't exist. But it's like I've dealt with so many people going on and I still feel their presence. And when I feel their presence, I of course think of their, like, making me emotional, but like I think of their physical presence too, because that's how I identified with them. So that's the part that feels like uncomfortable, where it's like, to me, it seems so weird that that energy would ever take on anything besides being my grandma, if that makes sense. Sorry, I was like, why am I having trouble with this concept? Like, everyone else seems to just get their past life freak on, and I'm like,
You're like, absolutely not.
I love what you said. I think that that is a beautiful part of the process. Each of these things, we should be asking questions like that. The process, that Teresa has been on, my mom, and even myself, like, it's been over 10 years for me that I've been on this journey. And there were a freaking FREQ, a lot of questions along the way. And that's how your faith gets stronger, in my opinion, is by asking the questions, and slowly but surely those answers will come to you. And I could try to throw out here my opinion on that, like, oh, maybe a soul doesn't reincarnate until X amount of time, and at that time you maybe would have already passed on, so you never have to think of them in a different form because they'll always be that form while you're in this incarnation. But I don't know. I don't know. That's a theory. But I do think that there are answers out there, and there are people you can ask those questions to. And as we know from the Celestine prophecy and in general, ask and you shall receive, right? Those answers will come to you. I think it's beautiful what you're thinking and feeling and questioning.
I know you want to preserve your grandmother as your great grandmother as you feel her. But I will say, if you had such a deep connection to her, in my opinion, there's probably no doubt that there has been many, many deep connections before.
yeah, that's, sorry to turn this so emotional, but I mean, she's my great grandma, not even my grandma, my great grandma. She died over 10 years ago. I still obviously feel very connected. Like, I think about her all the time and I see those signs. And so it's all like very good things. It's happy tears and sad tears, but that is also, I think, where I feel a little bit stuck with the past life concept.
I really can't believe I didn't pick Journey of Souls for the next one for us to read. But really, Jenna, Journey of Souls would be very interesting because it then might even give you more insight.
We have been known to change books at the last minute.
Yeah.
That's me.
Us? Well, one quick thing I really wanted to say just super fast. So that the other thing that I loved, I believe this was discussed in this book, but this idea that we have these soul groups that we reincarnate with a lot brings me a lot of like joy, love, peace, and comfort. That my mom and I know, have shared many, many, many lives. And although I've definitely been her mom at other times, that's never played out here. I mean, no.
Darian's going to fall off her chair.
I am, because I'm just like, I could totally see you doing that now.
But just to know that these people that we feel this deep soul connection with, we probably had many experiences with and we'll have more with. It's like a really comforting idea. To me, at least. It's, it's not like, oh, we're just going to reincarnate. Peace out. See you in 10,000 years. Like, it's like, no, hey.
Yeah. So we should probably move on. Is there a passage you want to share? Was there one that that was important that you felt you really wanted to share? Or what are your thoughts?
I don't think the book was written that you would have a passage. There might have been an uncovering or a discovery. And that's kind of where I guess that would be my 2 cents, is it's more of an overall feeling of discovery and what can happen when you're open to the universe. You might need that particular healing or that modality, and to be open to the discovery.
Yeah, for me, the only thing that really jumped out was there were a few messages from the masters I just thought were nice.
And then that's a whole nother book. Yeah.
I actually did have one I really did want to talk about because I think it's just so important. But again, not everyone comes from the same background, but kind of coming from that Christian background, I thought this was a super profound piece of information on page 35. There were indeed references to reincarnation in the Old and the New Testaments. In AD 325, the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, along with his mother Helena, had deleted references to reincarnation contained in the New Testament. The Second Council of Constantinople, meeting in AD 553, confirmed this action and declared their concept of reincarnation a heresy. Apparently, they thought this concept would weaken the growing power of the church by giving humans too much time to seek their salvation. Yet, the original references had been there. The early church fathers had accepted the concept of reincarnation. The early Gnostics, Clement of Alexandria, Origen, St. Jerome, and many others believed that they had lived before and would again. And this was profound to me because I think that a lot of people are like, well, that's unchristian to believe in past lives. And for me, I really, in my own purview, clearly, as done in his research, he shows that there is reference in past literature in Christianity around reincarnation. That's huge. Huge to consider that that was a part of Christianity. Secondly, in my own purview, I loved how he talked about the different energies that she would go to when her soul would pass away. Because I truly believe that you can still have a traditional Christian concept that fits into these ideals. And again, it's taken me many years to come to this, but talk about heaven, talk about hell. Heaven is this unbelievably high vibration energy, frequency. Hell might be this dark, low energy. And he talks about that in the book, that some souls that have done really terrible things go to this lower level of energy. But it doesn't mean that they're damned there forever. They have the opportunity to learn lessons and have different experiences. But why can't these all fit together? I believe they can, and I believe so much in this book supports those ideals. There's this beautiful heaven, this high vibration. There might be lower vibration places you go when your soul leaves, and it's all about the frequency and energy that your soul's in resonance with and in this life and all the things it's meant to learn. And anyways, I'm just putting that out there as a potential contemplation that leaning into the maybe of past lives doesn't mean that you're throwing out everything you believe and have been taught.
That was a very good point, Ashley.
Thank you. We'll be here all night.
All right, so I'm just going to move on here to one quick question and then we'll wrap this up. Page 58 says, I felt more hope, more joy, more purpose, and more satisfaction in my life. It dawned on me that I was losing the fear of death. I wasn't afraid of my own death or of non-existence. I was less afraid of losing others, even though I would certainly miss them. How powerful the fear of death is. This is a huge question. Do you feel different about death after reading this book?
That's loaded. That's hard to answer.
I didn't think anything differently about death. I mean, I think I've always been a belief in the unknown after, and I'm not like 100% certain in my beliefs, but I've always been intrigued and interested in like leaning more towards the past life reincarnation, because I mean, we all have eternal souls living temporary human experiences. It didn't change my opinion or my thought or anything. I mean, death is inevitable regardless of what life you're in. The only thing that I remember hearing in the book that was towards death is interesting is that it said, I think something along the lines of like, we choose when, and I don't know if it said how, it might have, it's fuzzy in my head, when we die, and then
when we've learned all that we need to in this life, we don't have that choice in a sense. Like it's done. Like we've learned, we came here for that purpose, that learning. It's over at that point. It comes to a point where we're on maybe the verge of death. If we haven't hit all those points in our life that we need to, we don't have the choice. We have to continue on.
Darian, I would love to hear from you.
I would honestly say I don't really think it changed my fear of death. I think I really didn't walk away with much on it. I mean, I really didn't. When I sit here and I think about it, and I'm like, no. Death for me is, I don't want to. I want to experience as much as I can, as quickly as I can, and to dwell on the thought of death, I think is scary. But I am intrigued by my previous deaths.
Well, here's my feeling on the death part or the past life or whatever. This life will be a past life for us. We are living a past life in the present because it's all simultaneously. So wrap your head around that one, girls. You are living your past life.
Wrap your hand about it in your next life, you're under hypnosis, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, it took me to a book club.
Yeah.
I'm
Wow.
seeing Love Ignites Peace Book Club. It's a Wednesday night.
Yeah, 7:15.
And there is Teresa's mic drop for this podcast.
Thank you.
One, I was like, coming. That kind of mic drop, yeah. Oh, boom,
Never fails.
Jenna, do you want to share any thoughts that you had to this change your thoughts around death at all?
I think it was a good reminder. I don't know. It's hard because I agree with Darian that death is a scary thing. I don't necessarily spend a lot of time thinking about it because I'm the type of person that wants to get as much out of life as I can. So whether it's just this life or I have a million other ones, like this is the only one I know of. So I'm trying to travel every place I can, meet all of these amazing people, have connections, like have a great life and squeeze every drop out of it. So for that to end prematurely, that would be really disappointing. But I think it's always a good reminder. Like I totally agree that with the passing of other people, that their presence is still around. So that's always it's a nice reminder.
Maybe we shouldn't learn whatever lesson we're supposed to learn in this life. So as of tonight, I'm done with book club. Learn anymore. I'm scared.
Going down her, Darian.
Yeah, nice in the arms.
No, I genuinely think as I was sitting here listening to Jenna talk, I was like, I'm kind of scared now. Now I'm scared of kind of living out and learning more. Because I'm like, is this the lesson I'm supposed to be like learning and then I'm done? I don't want to do that. There's so much more I still want to do.
Well, that's why we get to come back and reincarnate. We get to do more and more and more.
And as a little nugget of hope, there was at the Loving Nate's Peace Launch event, a woman who got, and I know she'd be okay with me sharing this, her channeled message from Tracy was, you've learned the lessons that you need to learn. Now it's peace for you from here. So it's like she had overcome the things that she needed to overcome. And then she was able to live this very peaceful, many years left existence. And that was literally her message. So take part, take heed. It doesn't mean just because you've learned the lessons that you have to out.
I don't know where I've read this. I've read it a couple of different places. I can't remember where. But supposedly, let's just say that in this lifetime, you're an incredible opera singer, standing on stages across the world. You didn't become an incredible opera singer in one lifetime. You had many, many lifetimes of practicing this, getting better. until all of a sudden, until this lifetime, you reached the pinnacle because you'd had so many opportunities to practice. I actually thought that was really profound. And, I think about that in my own life. I've taken up writing, well, maybe I wrote in other past lives, but to me, this is just another opportunity this lifetime to practice my writing. And then I can come back and do it even better the next one, and even better the one after that. So I think your soul gets to pick those things.
I have so many questions. First of all, how do I study Beyonce's past lives and take notes? Second of all, I just feel like I have so many questions because, well, like one that I just thought of is we evolve through these past lives, right? But then why do we then start at an infancy stage? We aren't only just like immature in a mortal standpoint, but we're pretty like immortally immature too. Like we don't have an understanding of all these soul things. So if we've lived 90 past lives, then why don't we have those learnings from them until our physical bodies are more mature? So I have more questions than answers.
That's what I asked at the very beginning. Did the book make you, it picks, and then you keep asking more, and that leads to another question and another why, and well, how? And maybe that's the gift of the book, that it keeps us asking.
And many times children actually do have that higher intelligence, that tap into that greater knowing, a knowing that is kind of shut off when our cognitive brains start to develop more and more. So with that not in the way, kids many times, I mean, he even talks about this in some of the research he found in the book, speaking languages that they'd never been, how would this 2-year-old, 3-year-old know this language? They'd never heard it before. And recounting past situations that they would have never have known if it wasn't for them being connected to this innate intelligence from the past. So I think that kind of goes together with what you're saying.
Do you have anything you want to say on death before we go to our last question and wrap this up?
I don't really. I think I've answered a lot around death. I will say that when my grandpa passed away last December of 2021, it was my faith in beliefs like this that made it a lot easier. The fact that he had lived a long, beautiful life, but also the fact that I knew that his soul was going to this beautiful light place, and perhaps in his next life he could have an even better experience. And like you said, Jenna, these little God winks that happen where I just know he's around. Sounds weird, but like sometimes I can smell him. Like sometimes I'm like, Grandpa, I know you're here. Like, or I was really nervous about Ubering back. It was super late at night from the airport, and I all of a sudden started smelling him. And he was from Nebraska, and I get in the car, and the Uber driver was a guy from Nebraska who was a farmer. My grandpa had been a farmer. All these little things they were listening. He was listening to Loretta Lynn. My grandpa loved that kind of music. I don't know, little nuggets. So, but I'm just grateful for beliefs like this because it really does play into my faith in a lot of ways, and makes me feel more comfortable and secure in the idea of death. I don't think that takes away from the grief in certain ways, but I think that it at least provides comfort in death.
I think that the girls need to read Journey of Souls.
Maybe we'll read it in 3 or 4 months. How does that sound?
Yeah, if it's on the lineup, I'm going to wait. But if it's not on the lineup, then I'll read it now.
Darian, are you still going to be here with us in 3 or 4 months? Your resignation.
I mean, unless I've learned all the lessons in life, yes. I did want to touch on something just really quick. We kind of talked about how the book started with the stories of Catherine, and then it went into really about him. In listening to us all talk, I think kind of what happened was it was him giving other professionals the okay to pursue the research further of this and promoting it to the world.
Yeah, I agree with you on that perspective. And I think he even tried to say that, like, how many other people in my profession have experienced this kind of situation, but they're too afraid to talk about it.
Yeah, he was giving them the okay.
Yeah, I think that's really, I think that's a wise observation.
I mean, and too, because, I mean, we've said it, right? There's a gazillion books about this sort of stuff. Why? Was there a gazillion books then?
Not in 1988. I don't even think there was a gazillion books probably in the early 2000s. I don't know what Teresa thinks on that, but
No, that's why I asked. I mean, go back. This was one of the first books, and it was like, oh, wow. It unlocked Pandora's box almost for so much to come out and further explored and investigate.
yeah, I probably read this book in 2006 or 7, and I felt like my head had literally left my body.
Now, this time when I read, I was like, oh, well, it's kind of like old news.
Yeah.
Well, a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, we have information that, I mean, is literally at our fingertips. You have a question, you will find it. Google is your friend.
Well, I think the other thing that really was powerful about the book is the credibility. Him being a, psychotherapist. That means he was an MD. I mean, he was a full-on trained MD, head of his department. He gives a ton of credibility. I mean,
he went to Columbia and Yale. I mean,
I mean, I had a bunch of things highlighted in here: more credibility, more credibility, more credibility, because, like, as in it's offering more and more credibility, because I think that that's the one piece that people really hang on to. What about the science? What about the science? What about the, I want to prove it. I want to prove it. And it's like, it's okay to let go a little bit of that. I know that makes you feel safe, but it's okay to dip your toe and know that perhaps, like the Celestine Prophecy, I think I read this one in the Celestine Prophecy, perhaps the science is moving from that traditional scientific method to sometimes the things that we can't see. And that's a little bit harder to measure. So
I think, again, there's room for both, too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I believe what's super exciting is, and I hope to see them come together, is technology advances in the years to come. I can't wait for us to prove the things we can't see, but we know are there.
From 1 to 5, 5 being the best, what do you give Many Lives, Many Masters?
I'm going to give this one a 2.
Ooh, okay. Jess says 2.
I said 3.
Oh, 3. Okay.
Just, I guess, part of my own experience. Again, it does remind me just a little bit of the Red Book, but I really enjoyed the stories, so.
I'm going to give it a 3+.
Ashley?
I'm going to give it a 3 also.
River?
That is an excellent question. The first time I would have read it, I would have given it a 5. But I'm going to give it a 3 as well.
I just feel so conflicted. I don't even know what to do. I feel like for some people, I really think people should read this. Like, I don't want to discourage people from reading this, because I think this is huge. But, like, for me, 2.
2. Wow, we were on the same. I thought you were going to give it a higher score.
So what does that make our average?
Drum roll. 2.66.
Which is the lowest average of any book that we've read thus far.
But I do think it's an important read if you take it in the context of the period when it was written. Now we've experienced so many different modalities. We're so much more aware and informed that now what we're reading, that's kind of old news a little bit. And that's probably why we're giving it that score. But I do think it's an important read based on the period of when it was written.
So we have started off this book club. We've actually read quite a few classics since we started this book club. So we are going to read something brand spanking new for our next read. And so we're going to read Jay Shetty's new book, The 8 Rules of Love. We're going to get current with everyone out there in the world and talk about a current book.
Teresa, have you read this one, or is it brand new?
I have not read this one.
Is this
I'm
the first
kind of
one you haven't
excited.
read?
I'm kind of excited.
This is going to be a fun one. The first one Teresa hasn't read.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Erin, you did not look happy about that choice. Were you hoping for the Journey of Souls?
I mean, I still have a little hope that you're going to change it at the last minute. But no, I was actually ordering it on Amazon. Yeah, can we got to do a poll for a future book club about the Kindle versus the traditional book. I got a Kindle for Christmas. Traditional book is the way to go for book club. It just is.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's too hard to go back and forth.
When people are referencing pages, I can't even find my own quotes. So that I did a one and done on the Kindle. My leisurely reading is happening on the Kindle, not book club. So I'm gonna go order mine as well.
Doing like an Audible, I feel like I don't get nearly as much out of it. I'm not as hyper focused. I'm like, oh, I could be doing 12 other things while I'm listening to this book up, and I gotta like rewind 2 hours.
You can't highlight on an Audible.
That is true, but that's also why I did have my book with me. Prophecy that I was like, ooh, that sounded important. Hold on. Oh, no, go back.
I'm impressed that you can coordinate where you're listening to where you're finding it in the book. Like, that seems like a lot more work.
Well, I was just going to ask Ashley real quick. So what do you think about reading the 8 Rules of Love? Because I know you are like a self-help book. It is your favorite genre.
I've never heard of this book before.
Have you ever heard of Jay Shetty?
Nope.
Wow. You got to get out more, Ashley.
I know. I've been living under a rock the last year, so.
That's soccer.
You gotta get out of bed before 1:30.
Yeah, there you go.
I really am.
All right. Well, I'm going to close this podcast out with just a quote that was in the book, and it's from the book that we just read. This was on page 219, but the quote's from Teilhard de Chardin, who was he was like a Jesuit philosopher, and he said a lot of great things. But this is how I'd like to close. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And then the author goes on to say, our bodies are temporary. We are souls. We are immortal. We are eternal. We never die. We merely transform to a heightened state of consciousness, no longer needing a physical body. We are always loved. We are never alone. And we can never be harmed, never at this level.
And so it is.
So it is. That's right. That with you for the next month.
Thank you.
It's so awesome chatting with you all. I just love this time. Thank you for enriching my life.
Yay.
Bye,
Soul family.
everyone.
Book club soul family.
Right.
Yes, Book Club Soul Family.